Welcome, my name is Ranger Marguerite, and welcome to Marsh Billings Rockefeller National Historical Park, and welcome to Working Woodlands video series. Early successional forest is crucial to the survival of threatened bird and animal species in Vermont. Today, the National Park is engaged in caring for the forest through thinning and cutting in the historic and natural forest stands of the park. Join me while we go visit the Red Pine Stand and take a look at a wonderful example of early successional forest that the park has created. I am standing in front of the Red Pine Stand. It is the last plantation of trees set out by descendants of the Billings family in 1952. The primary purpose of this stand was to provide timber, but also used for pulpwood, telephone poles, railroad ties. Between the 1930s and 50s, it was a desirable tree to plant to replace the white pine, which was ravaged by disease and blight. When the park created its forest management plan in 2006, it had been nearly 15 years since the plan had last been thinned and was in critical need of work to improve the health of this historic plantation. The canopy in this stand was so dense, little sunlight got to the forest floor. Things were beginning to die back. Nothing grew here. Under these conditions, the habitat for wildlife is limited. The park conducted two thinning activities in 2007 and 2012, and the results was quite remarkable. The purpose was to improve the health of the historic plantation and to create a richer and more diverse habitat within it. Today it holds an example of early successional forest ecosystems. Let's go take a look. Once a dark forest, now light-filled with evidence of vibrant new growth. Succession is a natural process in which the pattern of regrowth of vegetation emerges after disturbance to land. Succession can form on rocks. Think about lichen and mosses. Eventually, the organic material generated from this adds nutrients and gives fodder to other plants to take hold. Forest succession is ephemeral and transitional. Nothing stays the same over time. Early succession eventually changes towards more complex and mature ecosystems with the emergence and diversity of species. Joining me today is Ben Machin, the consulting forester from Red Start. We asked him to join us today to talk about the goals of improving the biodiversity in this stand.
I'm Ben Machin with Red Start, and I've been honored to work here at the park since 2000 as the park's consulting forester. Today I think we're going to be talking about regeneration, about pioneer species, and about creating openings in the forest. We're standing in an area that was planted to red pine in 1950, and when I started working here, the red pines were incredibly crowded, and everyone that we brought to the site felt that this area was the highest priority in terms of thinning the forest and creating some more room for the overstory to grow. So we started working in this area, and we've treated it twice in that time frame. We had goals, along with timber management goals, we had goals to create more light on the forest floor and to develop another generation of young trees. You can see some of them behind me. We've got some white pine, we've got some birch, we've got some quaking aspen, and these are all species that need a lot of light to thrive. They're all pioneer species that are good at colonizing sites that have been disturbed. These are species that have played a critical role in getting the process of succession going. So some of these species like white pine and paper birch and quaking aspen, pin cherry, are trees that can colonize in grass and get growing really well with a lot of sunlight, but then they create conditions underneath themselves that are favorable for other tree species to grow, such as sugar maple and white ash and eastern hemlock and American beech, species that are going to subsist on the site for a far greater period of time. If you sort of think about some tree species as more like the hare and some more like the tortoise, these pioneer species that we're talking about today are much more like the hare. They're good sprinters, they get out fast, but they really can't last very long. And then over time the tortoises take over, and those are more like the American beech and the eastern hemlock. One of the more common pioneer species is quaking aspen. And so I'm going to bend this tree down just so people can see the leaves. This has a little bit larger leaves than would be typical. It's young and it's growing really fast and it's getting a lot of sunlight, so it's got some larger leaves. Not to be confused with big tooth aspen, which would also have a larger leaf but would have a more pronounced tooth along the edge. And so quaking aspen or popple is a terrific pioneer, thrives on sunlight, sprouts really well, competes with grass, and can grow really quickly, but is a fairly short-lived tree. And generally between 30 and 50 years of age is going to die and be replaced by some of the later successional species. Another great pioneer species is pin cherry, and I'll bend this branch down so people can see it a little bit better. And the leaves are in decline now because of the season, so you're not normally going to see all these dots on these leaves. The pin cherry has a seed that subsists for a long time and can sprout whenever the conditions are right. And so we're seeing pin cherry sprouting up in different areas of stand 4 where we've removed enough of the overstory trees where there's sunlight sufficient to get them established. White pine is a terrific pioneer species as well, and I want to show you the leading tip of the tree here, and this is where it would grow from. We can see this year's growth began here, last year's growth began here. We know that because it was such a dry summer that the trees had a harder time growing, and we're not surprised to see less growth this year. White pine's terrific at competing in grasses, and so his land was abandoned in Vermont when the agricultural period ended in the late 1800s and everybody moved west. Trees started growing up. White pine became fairly well dispersed on the landscape. Naturally, white pine would have grown more in sandy soils and river bottoms. That's where it would have had a competitive niche. It doesn't require a rich site, so we don't expect that it'll be a long-term significant part of the forest ecosystem in these upland settings. I want to talk a little bit more about why we would consider it important to get a new generation of trees established on a site. I think the most important thing is that it increases the diversity and hence the resilience of the overall forest. And the one thing we know is that things are changing all the time, and with the changing climate in particular, it's important that we have this diversity of species on the site.
Woodland owners have a choice to manage a forest for timber harvest or as untouched deep woods. But managing a forest means working to improve the overall health and to manage it for the ecological benefit it affords. By creating or maintaining early successional forests, we preserve healthy ecosystems from which all wildlife and humankind benefit. Thank you for joining me.